What would you do if the very thing you've been sent to acquire causes everyone you love to go insane and try to kill you? And it even has the power to raise the dead and change them into horrible monsters. You're going to have to do whatever it takes in order to survive. I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat your friends, the Marker, and the Necromorphs in Dead Space Aftermath. In the Aegis system of space, the hull of a ship drifts in the wreckage of an asteroid field. The bodies of crew members, bloody and mutilated, float in the void around the USG O'Bannon. Another spacecraft approaches. It docks and sends a crew of 5 Marines aboard the O'Bannon. The Marines climb aboard the ship using night vision in the darkened hull, which reveals innumerable corpses scattered everywhere. Their commander tells them that this is what they expected to find. A Marine announces a scan of the ship has revealed 4 bodies alive in another sector. The group moves towards the bodies, while they privately discuss what catastrophe could have caused the deaths of a crew of more than 100. On the engineering deck, the 4 survivors quietly celebrate their victory over their attackers as they hear the Marines approaching. They all tense up, but one man readies his weapon, vowing to protect his baby girl. Oh, how cute. The Marines enter the deck, weapons drawn. The 2 survivors begin to panic, while the other 2 try to keep everyone calm. The Marines are unsure if they can trust these 4. The biggest survivor pulls out a gun, escalating the situation. The Marine stuns them all, knocking them out. As the government ship USM Abraxas moves away, it obliterates the remains of the O'Bannon. Aboard the Abraxas, the Marines discuss their theories of what their superiors intend to do with the survivors. New interrogation officers have just boarded the ship for unknown reasons. At that moment, they run into the officers, whose menacing presence quells the soldiers' guessing. The interrogators meet their superior, who authorizes them to use any interrogation methods necessary to uncover what happened on the O'Bannon. For now, the government is claiming the tragedy to be a navigational error. The overseer allows the interrogation team only 7 hours, the amount of time it takes for their ship to dock, to get the truth. In a holding cell are the 4 survivors, Nicholas, Alejandro, Nolan, and Isabel. The guards take Nicholas first. On the way to the interrogation room, Nicholas frantically calls out for his daughter. No one else can see her, but a forlorn little girl walks the halls with them. She calls out to her father as her face becomes covered in blood. Nicholas is strapped to a chair in the interrogation chamber, still crying for his daughter. He doesn't want to talk about the incident, so the interrogators electronically induce a hallucination of his body being burned alive. It is his worst fear. When they finally calm him down, the investigators threaten to do worse to him if he does not tell them what happened on Aegis. Nicholas relents. He begins to tell them the story. He and his team are ordered for a classified emergency mission. Along the way to their destination, more crew members from the planet Titan board, engineers Alejandro, Omar, and Noah. Shortly before their arrival to Aegis 7, the entire crew meets under the leadership of Sergenko. Sergenko informs them they're heading to Aegis 7, a planet which is close to exploding, in order to attempt to stabilize the gravity. He then dismisses half the room, telling Nicholas and his crew to stay. To them, he reveals the real mission. Aegis 7 is decaying because of the discovery of an ancient artifact called the Marker. That's right, all you Dead Space fans. The Marker. It is a giant obelisk structure of extraterrestrial origin. The old mining colony on the planet attempted to destroy the Marker and the planet itself, only managing to smash it into bits. Nicholas and his team, Rin, Noah, and Isabel, are to find any fragments of the Marker and bring them back to the ship. The team questions the safety of this mission, but Sergenko promises they will get great rewards from any shards they can sell. Rin, in particular, is rather excited for the financial reward. When the O'Bannon arrives at the planet, the 2 teams board the shuttle. The engineers, Alejandro, Noah, and Omar, questions the others about their objectives. Nola feeds them a cover story about measuring the planet's gravitational fluctuations. Smooth, Noah. The shuttle makes a rocky landing on the surface. The 2 teams split up into their missions. The engineers are immediately skeptical of the others, not knowing why they would be sent to an exploding planet. They head towards the gravity stabilizer. Sergenko, Nicholas, Rin, Nolan, and Isabel decide to go separate ways to cover more ground. Each of their scanners are calibrated to pick up signals from the Marker. Okay, secret mission, an exploding planet. Things are off to a great start. Nicholas and his team may not have a choice in the matter of what missions they get assigned to, but they should at least be able to recognize a red flag when it's waving in front of their freaking face. This team was ordered on a secret mission, so secretive in fact that they did not know where they were going to or what they were doing there until they were almost practically there. Nicholas had probably done other secret missions during his time as a Marine, but this level of secrecy should have set off his own suspicions. And once they began to discuss the mission with Sergenko in private, he laid out the true purpose of the mission: collect any Marker shards possible. Could this turn out to be a fine mission? Probably, if you don't know anything about the Marker. Nicholas has no idea, unfortunately, but that also does not mean he has no reason to fear at all. Sergenko tells them that they can fetch a hefty price of 2 million credits per kilo and Rin way too gleefully accepted the mission, only thinking about the money. Shouldn't everyone be questioning this? 2 million credits is more than enough to turn any head. Anything worth that high of a price is likely to be dangerous in some way, if not from the actual product itself or from other parties interested in acquiring it. Even if, let's say, the artifact is not dangerous and cannot kill you itself. In that case, the only information the crew has is the artifact was discovered, causing the planet's previous inhabitants to try and destroy the entire planet. And somehow the marker was not destroyed, and now they must literally pick up the pieces on a decaying planet. Sounds suspicious, no? So down to Aegis 7 they go, but why split up? There are pieces to be found, sure, but the planet is actively ripping apart while they walk on it. This is the perfect time to implement a buddy system, don't you think? What if the ground opens up beneath their feet, or a freaking planetary level avalanche threatens to wipe them out? A single person is almost assured a swift death, but a group of people might even have just a fraction of a percentage chance to have a higher survival rate. Wouldn't that be worth it? Besides, none of the crew understands what the marker fragments can do. What if someone came across a huge piece that they needed more than 2 hands to carry? Well, I guess in that scenario, they just have to leave it be. Sorry, government, no marker fragment for you, but you know what would help? Having a buddy. Though there are engineers stationed around the planet using gravity stabilizers to attempt to make Aegis 7 a less dangerous place to be, that's all they can do. Attempt. The engineers themselves have no confidence that the stabilizers will do anything really. If it were me and the engineers were saying, hey yo, these precautions won't do much. We got 8 freaking stabilizers, but the planet is going to explode anyway. I'd probably listen to that. I'd take the shuttle and give the planet a little once over, sure, but spend as little time on the surface as possible. There is a way to scan for marker fragments, so just do that scan. From the air, duh. Make pit stop sure when you need to and scoop up that overpriced but very deadly marker shards. And look at that! Everyone is happy, healthy, and not on an exploding planet. Don't you think that's a great idea? That's what I would do, but it's not me. So we're gonna continue on with this really dangerous scavenger hunt floor is lava type of combination. Who knows? Maybe I'll be wrong and they'll turn out fine, but probably not. Nicholas makes his way across Aegis 7, and the surface is cracking, and lava is spewing out all around. He calls Rin, but the connection is faulty. She says she can barely find him on her tracker. Just then, Nicholas's scanner picks up a marker fragment. He bends down to grab it, and he quickly grows dizzy and disoriented. He screams in agony, and the vision of a gargantuan marker appears in front of him. He reaches towards it as the sound of his daughter's voice enters his ears. He spins around and sees his little girl standing in a mist not too far away. She calls out to him, asking what the greater purpose of human beings are. He runs into the mist, but she vanishes, reappearing on the other side of him. She scorns him for not protecting her as something else rushes past, twisting her body horrifically. Her neck corkscrews, peeling her head from her body. Blood bursts out of the cavity, and Nicholas cries out. He stumbles back and lays against some rocks. As a call from Rin comes through, he answers, but they can barely communicate with each other. She tries to learn his location and tells him to get back to the ship as soon as possible. The planet is all but exploding, and there's nothing more they can do. Nicholas climbs back to his feet, and his daughter reappears in front of him again, but at the same time a dark figure appears over her shoulder, its eyes glowing red. It slinks around her body and then strikes her down. His daughter's blood splatters onto Nicholas's helmet. The figure reappears and moves to strike him, knocking him down in fear. Rin runs towards and attempts to calm down the terrified Nicholas. She and the rest of the team look like a swarm of creatures to Nicholas, and he pushes them away. Sergenko notices the fragment in his hand, but Nicholas doesn't hand it over. He hears his daughter Vivian calling out to him again. He then sees her on the deck of the gravity stabilizer being dragged away by the creatures. He panics and begins to pummel the rest of the team to get away, and he breaks off. Nolan tells the others that he suspects Nicholas is having visions because of the fragment. Nicholas makes it to the gravity stabilizer and begins climbing. He gets to the operations deck and charges at the creature holding his daughter. In the real world, Alejandro, Omar, and Noah begin to fight back Nicholas's random attack. He grabs a wrench to use as a weapon, striking down Omar in a single blow. Alejandro holds him in a deadlock, trying to calm him down, but all Nicholas sees are more creatures. Finally, Nicholas breaks away and reaches Noah at the control panel. He thinks Noah is holding his daughter and swings the wrench at him. Noah narrowly avoids the blow, but the weapon hits the controls and the entire gravity stabilizer loses power. Everyone on the operations deck is thrown back in an explosion and knocked out. The smoke clears and Nicholas sees Alejandro holding Noah's limp body. He goes over asking if the monsters attacked, but Alejandro throws Nicholas aside using his robotic arm. Sergenko and the rest of the team appear. The leader takes the marker fragments and puts it in a container, then orders everyone back to the shuttle. The planet is too dangerous now that the gravity stabilizer is destroyed. Rin and Nolan restrain the unconscious Nicholas to a chair in the shuttle. Rin asks Nolan what could have happened. Nolan hypothesizes that the marker shard is causing those who touch it to have violent urges and hallucinations. Rin questions how could he have known that, and they exit the ship. Nicholas awakens and cries out for Vivian, who floats out of the ship. Nicholas returns to the USM Abraxas, still screaming for Vivian. The interrogators shock him back to reality. Some guards bring in a coffin-shaped box. The interrogator thanks Nicholas for his help and tells him he'll be put into cryosleep. As soon as the restraints are lifted, Nicholas attacks the guards. He snaps one's neck, steals his gun, and shoots the other guard in the head. He turns to the interrogator, who pulls a doctor up as a shield. Nicholas kills him. The interrogator pleads for his life, but Nicholas doesn't care about him. He calls out to his daughter as he runs out of the room. Security is alerted to his escape, but told not to harm him. Nicholas rounds the corner and sees two guards who immediately shoot him in the chest. He fires back two expert shots, hitting them both in the head. Vivian passes by the corpses and calls out again. Nicholas slowly follows towards her in an airlock. She drifts through the solid wall. A group of guards run towards the commotion. Nicholas enters the airlock, but collapses from blood loss. And Vivian calls out to him still, telling her father to hurry before he's taken away from her forever. Nicholas peels himself from the floor and opens the airlock just as the guards arrive. Everybody floats into the abyss of space, suffocating almost instantly. Nicholas drifts towards his daughter, who opens her arms. They embrace as his lifeless body floats past the window of the interrogation chamber. The interrogator laments the loss of someone who had direct contact with the marker shard. He directs his assistant to bring in Alejandro. In the holding chamber, Nolan frantically paces around, mumbling about the shard. Alejandro commands him to shut up, but Nicholas refuses. Isabel asks what the security siren's been blaring on about. Nolan calmly states that Nicholas is dead. He can sense it. Isabel scolds him for lying. Nolan claims that the marker shard made all of them connected and have become one. Okay, does this qualify as daddy issues? It does, right? I mean, come on. Vivian has daddy issues, but also Nicholas has daddy issues. Or maybe they're technically self-esteem issues? Or maybe the marker fragment messed with his head too much and now he just killed a bunch of people. Yeah, that sounds more accurate. Back to the story. In the holding cell, Nolan being a little bit of a weirdo and raving on about how everything is interconnected, he's kinda freaking everyone else out, but if he can actually sense what is going on in the rest of the ship, he could use this knowledge to change the odds to their favor. Knowing that Nicholas is dead and that the interrogators killed him, basically, Nolan should start devising a plan. If he teams up with Isabel and Alejandro, they could forge an escape route. We know from his altercation with Nicholas on Aegis that his mechanical arm is able to toss a full-grown man pretty far, and he did it like it was nothing. However, the guards on Abraxas were smart enough to take his arm away. Shoot. And that makes things a hair more difficult, but not impossible. The three people in the holding cell all survived a deadly ordeal that killed dozens, possibly hundreds of people. They have the necessary skills. If there are 3 or 4 guards entering that cell, that gives each survivor one guard to take down personally, and one guard for them to tackle together. Now, while I would admit these are not the most fair odds since the guards do have armor and weapons, but they're not impossible either. A simple ambush as the guards walk through the door should be enough of a distraction that the survivors can gain the upper hand. A quick snatch of a gun gives them plenty of firepower since they are high-powered weapons. The guards should be sufficiently startled if they found themselves staring down the barrel of one of them, don't you think? I would think so. Also, the chaos caused by Nicholas's death provides an opportunity as well. He did not cause any damage to the ship, but he did kill a group of soldiers and cause a bloody mess around in the halls. Surely some people, like a freaking janitor of some sort, is moving around to clean up the situation, and if they happen to find said janitor mopping up blood, that can be of use to them. Once they overpowered the guards, they could also overpower the janitor crew and take their clothes in order to be able to better blend in. And they could easily do this while there's a commotion for cleanup on aisle 7, if you get what I mean. Back on Aegis 7, however, the question arises of why Rin and the others felt the need to save Nicholas. They might be friends, but he's going on a really freaking violent rampage on a planet that's already trying to kill you. It's such a wild and deadly environment, and there's a lot going on to prevent anybody from thinking too critically, but it doesn't make it impossible for someone to make the connection between the marker and Nicholas's erratic behavior, cause he grabbed the freaking rock and now he's acting freaking crazy. Not that hard. And while they know as little as they do about the fate of those on the planet before them, and they do know that the properties of the marker are highly classified, Rin could have pieced together that the marker is bad news, as I already said, because 1, there is a huge price tag attached to them, and also a guy you've known for several years has just tried to kill several of you. Now is the time to pick one side or the other. A situation like this seems like the perfect place to cut your losses and get out alive. Sorry, Nicholas, but we're gonna grab that marker fragment and jump aboard the ship. ship, and we can leave the crazy man behind. Alejandro is taken to the interrogation room, where he's induced to hallucinate spiders crawling all over his body, nasty, and some even come out of his mouth. After experiencing that nightmare, he then agrees to cooperate as long as the hallucinations stop. Alejandro begins to tell his story. On Aegis 7, he, Noah, and Omar left the other team and headed to the gravity stabilizer, wary of the true mission's purpose. On their way to the stabilizer, an eruption began, so they ran even faster. Once at the stabilizer, they climbed onto the control deck, and objects were suspended in low gravity. They each ran to a computer, and Noah manages to reprogram the computer before any real damage happens, and regular gravity returns, and the objects fall back into place. The three of them spend a while waiting around for the others to complete their mission. Noah plays a holo game, complaining about its difficulty. Oh, come on, Noah, it's not that hard. And Omar asks Alejandro about his mechanical arm. Alejandro downplays the story, not wanting to talk, and Noah jumps in and says that the mining accident which took his cousin's arm was also the same accident during which Alejandro saved the lives of 5 others working alongside a malfunctioning gravity stabilizer. Alejandro doesn't consider himself a hero because 15 others died during the explosion. Omar consoles Alejandro, commenting on his own strange life's journey. He reveals a medallion, that of the Unitologists. Aha, one of those. A religious organization which believes that humans were created by alien life forms. Noah scoffs at the idea, but Omar poses the question of how such an advanced and seemingly perfect species developed from nothingness. As the trio discusses the possibilities of meaningless importance, a figure joins them on the platform, Nicholas. Another gravity eruption shakes the stabilizer. Each man runs to their station, hardly noticing Nicholas, who walks over with a wrench, muttering about Vivian. Omar sees him first and is knocked out with a blow to the head. Alejandro blocks Nicholas's attack towards Noah. The two enter their deadlock before Alejandro pushes him away, and Nicholas gives Alejandro a freaking headbutt and knees him in the stomach. Ooh, rude. And then he approaches Noah. The young boy is busy on the computer and manages to quell the eruption just as Nicholas comes up from behind him and swings, bashing his helmet in. Noah falls down as Nicholas smashes the computer, triggering the explosion that knocks him down. Rin and the others race to the control deck, and Alejandro cradles Noah, who is spasming and bleeding profusely. Nicholas finally comes around and asks, guys, did the monsters attack? And a very pissed off Alejandro easily throws him away through the railing of the stabilizer. Rin injects Noah with medicine and checks his vitals, but it is too late. Noah dies in his arms. Rin pulls Alejandro away from his cousin and towards the computers of the failing machine. Everyone realizes that the machine and the planet are past saving. They can only evacuate. And so the crew races off the tower and towards the shuttle, leaving the bodies behind. And they run across the exploding planet, and a chasm opens ahead of them. Rin and Alejandro jump across, but he slips and Rin grabs his arm. But after she pulls him back up to safety, she slips and falls into the lava core. Everyone freezes in shock. Sergenko commands them to get to the ship as he mutters a eulogy for his fallen comrade. But now the chasm is too wide to cross. Alejandro yells out to Sergenko to go around, but the lava is coming too quickly. The commander tosses the marker shard to Alejandro and orders them to get off the planet and protect the shard at all costs. I don't know about you, but I would maybe let it go. The lava reaches his feet and his body combusts, disintegrating, and the ashes float into the sky. Before the group can even react, a huge rock falls and crushes Omar, and his guts splatter everywhere. The group runs to the shuttle. Alejandro jumps behind the wheel and takes off as the ground splits apart. Nicholas screams for answers from his restraints. Several shuttles take off from the rupturing planet, swerving around asteroids and debris. The O'Bannon begins to move away from the planet, and Alejandro panics and pushes the shuttle even harder. They fly between the ship's thrusters and make a crash landing onto the docking bay. The shuttle bursts into flames and the crew stumbles out. Alejandro takes the marker fragment and storms into the flight deck. He demands that the captain answer for Noah's life now. But at that moment, the Aegis 7 explodes, propelling the O'Bannon into space. The crew attempts to maneuver around the debris. Out of nowhere, an asteroid collides with the ship, knocking out the power and throwing everyone around. The captain orders the crew to use the force of the planet's explosion to propel them into space, but the ship's engine is useless with a damaged shock point drive. The captain orders Alejandro to take the engineers to fix the problem, but he refuses until he receives answers about the real mission. And finally, the captain relents and takes him and the rest of the team to the conference room. Isabel updates the captain on the happenings of Aegis 7, adding that the rescued bodies are being stored, and Nicholas is under observation. The captain looks at the marker shard and starts whining and complaining about how he didn't get a larger piece. Oh, get over it. Alejandro furiously questions if the rock was really worth all of the lives it cost. Nolan defends the captain's choices, pointing out there's no way he could have known what would have happened. The captain assures Alejandro that the price they can fetch for that shard will be more than enough to support Noah's family, enraging Alejandro, who assaults him, and the captain reminds him that the ship is inoperable and demands that he starts repairs now or spend time in the prison hold. Alejandro walks towards the engine room and stops when he's alone to apologize to Noah. Aboard the Abraxas, the interrogators question if Alejandro ever came into direct contact with the marker shard, a lie to detector scan reveals that he did not. They unrestrain him. He's in disbelief at being let go. The guards lead him into the hallway, and he explains that he did not expect to survive the ordeal aboard the O'Bannon. A guard then shoots him in the back of his skull, and the body bleeds onto the floor. The interrogator directs them to store the corpse. They then bring in Noah. I'm sensing a theme here, guys, aren't you? This is not good. In the interrogation chamber, Nolan is sealed into a coffin. He pounds against the wood, but cannot escape. The hallucination wears off, and he finds himself sitting in the chamber. He agrees to cooperate with the investigation, and the interrogator asks more questions, and he reveals that he's been a science officer aboard the O'Bannon for little more than a year, all the while aware of the secretive mission to investigate the marker. Once again, back on the ship from Aegis 7, he visits his wife and infant child, and they discuss the damage to the ship, preventing them from going home. His wife asks if the catastrophe has to do with his secret government work, but Nolan avoids the question and then heads to the lab to inspect the marker fragment, and his wife accuses him of having an affair with Isabel, but Nolan also ignores that too. He stops at the captain's quarters to retrieve the marker shard. The captain is drinking profusely and demands answers about what the shard is really capable of. Nolan doesn't answer, but the captain complains that he can hear voices from the rock in his head. It's driving him crazy. Nolan takes the shard and suggests the captain visits the medical bay for a checkup. In the laboratory, Nolan x-rays the marker shard, finding a series of writings in a strange script imprinted on it. He cannot find out what the writing was made of, and theorizes that the crystal itself somehow made the markings. The longer he stares, the more he becomes entranced, and suddenly he is possessed by the marker and begins to write perfectly in the foreign language. Isabel enters the lab, so Nolan dismisses his assistant. Once she leaves, Nolan tries to explain the significance of the marker to Isabel, and saying it contains information that could alter the purpose of the human race. But she ignores that and begins to seduce him, and then they do the dirty on the floor of the lab. Later, Nolan shows the captain his findings. The marker contains instructions that allows it to alter human DNA into something else when it comes into contact. Nolan suspects that the altered DNA could change the human body into something more powerful. He thinks that the marker was made by advanced beings of an alien species, perhaps what the human mind would perceive of as a god. The captain dismisses the idea, but asks how this could have affected Nicholas. Nolan guesses that the shard causes psychosis in almost every human it touches. Nicholas, he says, was already very mentally fragile because of the loss of his daughter. The marker simply pushed him over the edge. Then Nolan begins to see the markings everywhere, in the captain's shadow, reflected in the whiskey glass, and the captain notices the change in demeanor but does nothing. Back in the lab, Nolan continues his search, but out of nowhere he has a nightmare's vision of mutilated corpses and understands the marker's ability to transmit visions. He decides to try its properties on a human. He then heads to the morgue and selects the body of someone killed in the asteroid impact. He takes the dead person back to the lab and exposes it to the marker, which then begins to reanimate the corpse. Amazed, he turns away from the monitor and sees the body has vanished from the table. He goes into the testing chamber and is attacked by the now moving corpse, which tries to strangle him. He then snaps back to reality. He freaks out and panics when he finds out who he was actually strangling. He backs out of the chamber, and his assistant comes in. Before he can say anything, the corpse reappears and attacks her, slashing her neck in half, and Nolan runs for his life, unsure what is real and what is not. But you know what is real? He just created a freaking necromorph. In the morgue, doctors examine the corpse when one snaps back to life. Nolan runs through the hallways as the creature chases after him. He hides in a vent near some working repairman, and the necromorph kills the worker as Nolan cowers. As it leaves, he runs towards a comm console and tries to call the captain. The captain is mid-call with Alejandro in the engine room, who complains that he cannot repair the engine with so few workers. And in that moment, a swarm of necromorphs bursts into the engine room and attack. The call is severed. The captain orders a security team to head to the engine room immediately, and he again ignores Nolan and ends the call. Nolan panics as the ship's sirens wail and people scramble to safety. He hallucinates the strange writings on the wall again, and he thinks of his wife and child. Oh, you're thinking about your wife now? Oh, now aren't you so freaking loyal? Anyways, necromorphs reach the hallway and begin tearing through the crew and pierce their skulls and tear off their limbs, and Nolan dashes back to his quarters. He finds the room empty and calls out to his family, and then a small creature attacks him. He takes it down easily as a larger one storms at him. He beats it down, then strikes the final blow. Isabel runs into the cabin to warn him of the threat and sees the bludgeoned bodies of Nolan's wife, child. She panics as Nolan weeps on the floor. But let's put a pause on that nightmare. Back to the interrogation room. Nolan is hounded about the whereabouts of his family. He continues on to say that he barricaded them in their quarters. The interrogators shock him with increasing voltage, but he sticks to his false answer. They're stunned and amazed at how convinced he is by his own delusion. The guards bring in a cryo chamber and place Noah inside. He panics as they wheel him away. The interrogator tells his assistant that Nolan is almost everything the overseer wants. He was exposed to the marker shard and communicated communicated with it. He then directs her to bring in the final survivor, Isabel. Okay, Isabel, it is time to get your head in the game. Okay, let's go. The guards are coming for you. And you gotta notice how all of your comrades have been taken in for questioning and not a single one has returned afterwards. You might want to think about that. Some serious shit is going on down across the hall. If there was any time to activate your fight or flight response, now would be that time. You survived a ship swarming with necromorphs. I'm pretty sure you could find your way past some humans. Now, while the opportunity has seemingly come and gone without any sort of mutiny against the guards, a single person in a cell without weapons versus 4 guards in armor with blasters? Sure, the odds are not in your favor, but there are better options present outside of the cell. The interrogators are not caring, rational people, but they do understand logic. Bargaining with them does not seem like a viable option, but attempting to please them could be your best bet, Isabel. Head into that interrogation chamber like a frickin' Chick-fil-A employee and say, "Hello, how may I serve you today?" Make everything your pleasure, and you might just make it out alive. She knows what they're being interrogated about, and she has the knowledge of what they are seeking, at least for the most part. She didn't come into direct, significant contact with the marker fragments herself, but she observed a whole lot of plenty of the effects of it on other people. They have no reason to kill her at this moment yet, so her best plan is to keep that to her advantage. Do not trust the interrogators, but keep them really happy and give them a sandwich until the ship has landed, and then you can figure out your next steps and hopefully kill them out of revenge. On the O'Bannon, Isabel also had the power to change things, particularly when it comes to Nolan and his family. Yeah, she should not have been having an affair with Nolan, but that is kinda moot at this point. Nolan understands the marker better than anyone else on this ship. Isabel should have been listening to him rather than pushing this vital information to the side and initiating, the dirty. Yes, I know having a hubba of a good time can reduce stress, and the entire crew could absolutely have a little less stress in their lives after witnessing the disaster on Aegis 7. But whatever Nolan has uncovered about the marker is way more important than giving in to your libido. Duh! Does Nolan sound crazy? Yeah, certainly. Isabel should have been wary of him at all costs, but hear out what he has to say. At least this way you could arm yourself with whatever knowledge he has gained, without going through the dangerous ordeal of exposing yourself to the shard. Take the knowledge to the captain immediately. He might not be on your side, and he might not want to take the marker off of the ship, but at least he'll understand the danger that everyone is now in. With the marker now on board the O'Bannon, the safest thing to do from ejecting it into the nothingness of space is to quarantine. Without in-depth psychic analysis of Nicholas and Nolan, without the tests on the marker itself, it is clear that these ingredients should not mix. So don't do that. While the O'Bannon is inoperable and sitting like a duck in the debris of an exploded planet, there's a lot of waiting. Waiting for the engine to be repaired, waiting for the bodies to be counted, waiting for someone to pass by and give the ship a little jump start. But you know what people should not be waiting on? For all hell to break loose, because no one is attempting to stay a safe distance from the one new piece of cargo. They maybe did not cause all the destruction, but it sure did suspiciously enter the manifest right around the time everything went haywire. Interesting, don't you think? In the meantime, though, Isabel could try to interview and observe Nicholas to understand what exactly occurred once he came into contact with the marker. And while she's at it, it would be wise to begin some sort of therapy intervention with Alejandro as well. He just lost his cousin and is pretty torn up about it, and as a matter of fact, the entire crew of the O'Bannon could use a little TLC after what they experienced. Isabel alone cannot handle all of this, but she could at least get the ball rolling in the right direction, since there is a little else to do on an inoperable ship floating through empty space through planetary debris. Oh well. The Abraxas approaches the planet's sprawl, and it prepares to dock. The interrogator tortures Isabel until she finally begins to explain what happened aboard the O'Bannon. She and Nolan began doing the dirty a few months prior, and she says that it was purely an accident. Isabel, doing the dirty with a married man is not an accident. And they spoke about him leaving his wife, though she didn't want him to. And after doing the dirty in his lab, they begin to discuss the marker fragment. Nolan tries to explain the ultimate importance of the object to her, but she doesn't get it. She wants to run psychic evaluations on him, but he refuses and claims to be fine and that he's not crazy. Isabel goes to check on Nicholas, who is stabilized in the medical bay. He believes Vivian is aboard the ship somewhere, playing. Not wanting to break his peace, Isabel plays into his delusion. She then takes the medical team to the morgue to examine the bodies killed in the escape from Aegis 7. They walk into the room to find most of the bodies have been tossed around, and the staff has been killed. Before they can do anything else, a giant necromorph rushes and attacks Isabel. They make it out of the morgue and seal the door as the massive creature slams into it. Just then, the emergency sirens begin blaring. The group disperses and heads towards their stations. Isabel hurries back to the medbay, and Nicholas is frantic, and he is positive that the creatures are back. Isabel takes off his restraints just as a necromorph smashes through the door. Nicholas grabs a tool and slices its arm off. The creature lunges again, and he cuts it down the middle. It collapses. Isabel begins to panic, but Nicholas says that he knows the marker is responsible. Isabel and Nicholas make their way through the eerily quiet ship, heading towards Nolan's quarters. They come across a giant pool of blood. Then the Marine chief chief emerges from the shadows, grazed and wielding an axe. Before he can attack, he's pulled back into the shadows by the creature. Isabel and Nicholas run away. They soon arrive at Nolan's quarters. Isabel enters alone, finding Nolan standing above his mutilated family. He approaches her, trying to explain himself, but she panics and leaves. Outside, the Necromorphs begin surrounding them in the hallway. The captain and the other crew members appear. It's a slaughter. The captain tries to get answers from Nolan, but it's too chaotic. Then Nicholas sees the ghost of Vivian and begins to run after her. Isabel convinces the others to follow Nicholas into the vent. The Necromorphs won't fit through, she says. They climb inside, but the last officer is grabbed and killed by a creature. The captain begins to mourn, but Isabel coaxes him back to reality, and they begin moving again, though Nolan is skeptical of following Nicholas. They make their way to an empty chamber. Nicholas crawls out first and is immediately attacked by Alejandro. Everyone else tries to calm him down, but he stays wary of the Marine. Then two more survivors enter the room, one with a nearly ripped off arm. Isabel begins attending to the wound. Nolan offers to help, but she pushes him away. The captain grills Alejandro, who says the engine and shock point drive are still in disrepair. The captain then tries to get Nolan to make sense of the situation, but he only repeats that the Necromorphs are the new beings, a more intelligent life form than humans. Soon, he says, they will all converge into one mind. The other survivors grow worried, saying that their mother used to recite a unitologist proverb. This means the end of days is coming. Nolan explains that the Necromorphs are controlled by signals from the marker, which is impossible to destroy. Nicholas tries to shoot the fragment, but it does no damage. Nolan says the only way to completely destroy it is by throwing it into the heart of a star. Alejandro suggests the engine's reactor core could do the trick. He reveals a stash of weapons. The captain orders everyone to arm themselves, and they head towards the infested engine room. They're soon attacked by an enormous creature. Nicholas shoots it directly in the eye, only managing to anger it. Everyone runs, the captain bringing up the rear and fires off shots. They come across the survivor's roommate. Isabel tries to warn her not to approach, but it's too late. The Necromorph spits on her, burning off her skin. The rest of the crew has no choice but to keep moving. They make it to the engine room door, but an asteroid pierces the ship, creating a vacuum, pulling many of the creatures out into space. One of the survivors is tackled by a Necromorph and killed. Nicholas begins to get pulled out, but Alejandro grabs him and manages to prevent his death. The captain and the remaining crew make it back into the engine room, but cannot seal the door. The only working switch is back outside. The captain hands over the marker shard and orders them to complete the mission. He goes back out and locks the door, then grabs a grenade and runs towards the swarm of creatures as it explodes. The explosion creates another hole in the ship, sucking their bodies into space. Isabel collapses in shock. The group then moves towards the reactor. Suddenly, more Necromorphs start dropping down from the ceiling onto Alejandro, who shoots them but drops the marker. Nicholas catches it, and everyone looks up to realize they're surrounded. The hive begins attacking. Everyone fights for their life, and the marker gets tossed around. It finally ends up in Nolan's hands. It begins to whisper to him, glowing with power. The others yell at him to destroy it, but he cannot move. Isabel manages to get around a creature and get to Nolan. He begins to praise the marker and says that it's too important to destroy, but she's had enough. She punches him in the face, causing him to drop the shard, and she flings it into the reactor. A surge of red electricity shoots everywhere, passing through each Necromorph's body. They splatter blood everywhere as they rip apart. Once things settle, the four survivors huddle together. Back on the Abraxas, Isabel finishes her story. The interrogator remarks that it's a waste of a talented brain that she did not come into contact with the marker shard herself. And now Isabel realizes the truth. The government knew what would happen. They wanted to create a test group to see how the marker affected an entire population. The interrogator confirms this. At that moment, the overseer enters the room. He greets Isabel and apologizes for her discomfort. He takes her out of the room, giving his thanks to the interrogator as he does. The guards take formation behind the interrogators and shoot them in the back of the head. In the hallway, the overseer explains to Isabel that he and his superiors believe that the power of the marker can be harnessed into something of even greater, but controlled power. And he asks for her help in that research. But first, he needs her silence in creating a cover story for the disaster, which has now reached the news. She refuses, stating solidarity towards her deceased crewmates, and the overseer expresses how sorry he is that she cannot help. A team of doctors then grab her and restrain her on a table, and a lobotomy needle lowers over her terrified face. A few days later, the overseer watches the news with his officer. A cover story about Isabel's betrayal and mutiny on Aegis 7 plays. The doctors bring in the crowd chamber with Nolan inside, and the overseer instructs the officer to take care of Nolan. He's the only other survivor who has been exposed to the marker, aside from the original pilot who first discovered the object on Aegis 7. The officer puts the chamber into place with Nolan still inside. And if you don't want the marker to come after you, then you better hit that like button, subscribe, leave a comment down below, let us know what you like about the video, and also what you didn't like about the video. And as always, don't forget to check out our How to Beat playlist.